David Loy, a renowned philosopher and Buddhist thinker, offers a fresh, deeply insightful perspective on the current global ecological crisis. Have you ever wondered if the environmental issues we face go beyond physical problems? Could it be that the crisis is spiritual at its core? Loy thinks so. In his work, he delves into the heart of Buddhist teachings to uncover how our distorted sense of self, and our disconnection from nature, are driving environmental destruction. And when you think about it, isn't it mind-blowing how interconnected everything truly is? Loy doesn't just provide a list of technical solutions or policy changes, which often seem superficial compared to the enormity of the problem. No, he offers something much deeper, a shift in consciousness, a spiritual awakening that can change the way we live, the way we treat the earth, and how we relate to the world around us. So, if you're ready to explore these profound ideas, let's dive into how David Loy uses Buddhist principles like interdependence, suffering, compassion, and non-self to confront one of the greatest challenges of our time. David Loy's philosophical approach, rethinking the ecological crisis. What's truly revolutionary about David Loy's approach is that he doesn't see the ecological crisis as just an environmental issue or a problem that science alone can solve. And here's where it gets really interesting. He argues that at the heart of the crisis lies a fundamental misunderstanding about who we are and how we relate to the world. Are we truly separate from nature? Can we continue to dominate and exploit it without consequences? Loy says no, and he bases his argument on Buddhist teachings that tell us we're deeply interconnected with all living things. Isn't that a profound realization? Think about it. In modern society, we often operate as if we're autonomous beings, cut off from the rest of the world. This illusion of separateness fosters a mindset of exploitation. Nature becomes something we can control, use, and discard. But Loy challenges this idea, drawing on the Buddhist concept of pratitya samutpada, or interdependence, which reveals that all beings and phenomena are interconnected. This isn't just an abstract philosophical concept. It's a reality that, if understood and embraced, can transform how we treat the environment. Imagine if everyone understood that harming nature is harming ourselves. What a shift that would create. Loy believes that the illusion of separateness lies at the root of environmental degradation. It allows us to live in ways that exploit the earth, believing that what happens out there doesn't affect us. But if we recognize the truth of interdependence, we begin to see that we're not separate from nature, we're part of it. And this realization, according to Loy, is key to fostering a relationship with the environment that is based on care, respect, and stewardship, rather than domination and exploitation. Buddhist concepts applied to environmental ethics, impermanence, suffering, and non-self. What's truly exciting about Loy's work is how he applies core Buddhist teachings, impermanence, suffering, and non-self, to environmental ethics. These aren't just abstract ideas to meditate on in a monastery, they are practical guides for how we can navigate the ecological crisis and, more importantly, how we can transform our lives and our relationship with the planet. Impermanence, anicca. Recognizing ecological vulnerability. One of the foundational teachings of Buddhism is impermanence, or anicca. Everything is constantly changing, nothing stays the same forever. While this might seem like a simple idea, it holds profound implications for how we think about the environment. Loy emphasizes that acknowledging impermanence is essential for understanding the fragility of the Earth's ecosystems. Have you ever thought about how vulnerable nature truly is? Just look at the degradation of forests, the extinction of species, or the melting of polar ice caps. These are all manifestations of impermanence. Yet, modern society often operates as if natural resources are infinite, as if technology will always provide solutions to any limits we encounter. Isn't that a dangerous illusion? Loy argues that this delusion fuels unsustainable consumption, and by failing to recognize the impermanence of natural systems, we blind ourselves to their vulnerability. This, in turn, leads to environmental degradation on a massive scale. But what if we embraced the Buddhist understanding of impermanence? Wouldn't that change how we approach the environment? By accepting that nature is fragile and constantly changing, we can cultivate a deeper respect for it. Rather than exploiting the earth as a resource to be controlled and consumed, we can recognize its inherent value and treat it with the care it deserves. Suffering, dukkha, the environmental crisis as a form of collective suffering. Another central concept in Buddhism is dukkha, often translated as suffering or dissatisfaction. According to Buddhist teachings, suffering arises from ignorance, attachment, and desire. And here's where Loy makes a brilliant connection. He argues that the environmental crisis is both a cause and a symptom of human suffering. Isn't that an eye-opener? Our relentless desire for material wealth, consumer goods, and economic growth leads to overconsumption and environmental exploitation. But does all that consumption really bring us happiness? Or does it just lead to more suffering, for ourselves and for the planet? Loy suggests the latter. He points out that the destruction of the environment, through pollution, climate change, and the loss of biodiversity, is a direct result of our misguided efforts to satisfy desires that can never be fully met. In this sense, the environmental crisis is a manifestation of collective suffering, not just for humanity but for all living beings. Buddhism teaches that the cessation of suffering, nirodha, comes from letting go of attachment and cultivating mindfulness and compassion. Imagine if we applied this same principle to our relationship with the environment. By reducing our attachment to material possessions and consumption, we could alleviate not only our own suffering but also the suffering we inflict on the natural world. Doesn't that feel like a liberating way to live? Non-self, anatta, challenging the illusion of separation. Perhaps one of the most profound and challenging concepts in Buddhism is anatta, or non-self. The doctrine of non-self asserts that there is no permanent, unchanging self. Instead, what we think of as the self is actually a collection of constantly changing physical and mental components. This idea radically challenges the ego-centered view of existence, where individuals see themselves as separate from others and from the world around them. And it has profound implications for how we treat the environment. Loy argues that this illusion of separateness is at the root of the ecological crisis. Modern industrial society operates on the assumption that humans are distinct from, and superior to, nature. This mindset leads to a view of domination, where the environment is seen as a resource to be exploited for human benefit. But the Buddhist teaching of non-self reveals that this is an illusion. We are not separate from nature, we are deeply interconnected with it. When we harm the environment, we harm ourselves. So what would happen if we truly embraced the idea of non-self? Could it fundamentally change how we relate to the earth? Loy believes it can. By realizing that we are part of the same ecological web, we can cultivate a sense of ecological humility and responsibility. Our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the planet, and recognizing this truth can inspire us to take better care of the earth, not out of self-interest, but out of a deep sense of interconnectedness and compassion. Critiquing consumerism, breaking free from the illusion of happiness in material possessions, Loy doesn't stop at philosophical concepts, he takes on the giant of modern consumer culture. And let's face it, consumerism is a major driver of environmental destruction. But what's even more troubling is how deeply ingrained consumerism is in our daily lives. It's everywhere, isn't it? From the ads we see to the values we're taught, it's easy to believe that happiness can be found in material possessions. But Loy argues that this is a dangerous illusion. He sees modern consumer culture as a misguided attempt to find happiness and fulfillment through external objects. And here's the kicker: this desire for more wealth, more goods, more consumption, is fueled by the underlying dissatisfaction, dukkha, that Buddhism identifies as the root of human suffering. Isn't that striking? We're stuck in a cycle of craving, constantly seeking happiness in things that ultimately don't satisfy us. What's the result? We end up living in a world of overconsumption, where natural resources are exploited at an unsustainable rate, leading to environmental degradation on a massive scale. But Loy doesn't just critique consumerism for its environmental impact, he also highlights its social consequences. Consumerism relies on the extraction of natural resources and the labor of others to produce the goods we consume. In this way, it perpetuates not only environmental harm but also social inequality and injustice. Loy calls for a radical shift away from consumerism toward a more sustainable and compassionate way of life. He argues that we must prioritize spiritual well-being over material wealth. By reducing our craving for material possessions, we can break free from the cycle of dissatisfaction that drives overconsumption and environmental destruction. And doesn't that feel like a more fulfilling way to live? Compassion, karuna, as the driving force for environmental action, compassion, or karuna, is one of the central tenets of Buddhist ethics. And in Loy's view, compassion should extend beyond human beings to include all living creatures and the earth itself. After all, if we are interconnected with nature, shouldn't we feel compassion for the suffering caused by environmental destruction? Loy suggests that cultivating compassion is essential for addressing the ecological crisis. When we recognize the suffering caused by habitat loss, pollution, climate change, and other forms of environmental harm, we are moved to act, not just out of self-interest, but out of a deep desire to alleviate the suffering of others. This includes not only the suffering of animals and plants but also the suffering of future generations who will inherit a degraded planet. Imagine if we approached environmental issues from a place of compassion rather than exploitation. What would that look like? Would we be more mindful of our consumption, more thoughtful in our actions, and more committed to finding sustainable solutions? Loy believes that compassion can be a powerful motivator for change. It reminds us that we have a responsibility to care for the earth, not just for our own sake but for the sake of all living beings. Practical solutions to the ecological crisis, transforming consciousness and society. Loy doesn't just leave us with abstract philosophical ideas, he offers practical solutions for how we can address the ecological crisis. And the best part? These solutions are grounded in Buddhist teachings, so they aren't just about changing policies or technologies. They're about transforming how we live, both individually and collectively, simplifying lifestyles, embracing simplicity for the sake of the planet. One of the most practical solutions Loy proposes is simplifying our lifestyles. In a world that values accumulation and consumption, this can seem like a radical idea. But think about it, do we really need all the stuff we buy? Or could we find more happiness in living with less? Loy advocates for embracing simplicity as a way to reduce our ecological footprint. By letting go of attachment to material possessions, we can live more in harmony with the natural world. This is in line with the Buddhist principle of renunciation, which teaches that true happiness comes not from accumulating things but from letting go of our attachment to them. Imagine how freeing that could be, practicing mindful consumption, making conscious choices for a sustainable future. Another key solution Loy offers is practicing mindful consumption. In today's consumer-driven world, we often make choices without fully considering their impact. But what if we were more mindful of the consequences of our actions? Mindfulness, a core practice in Buddhism, encourages us to become more aware of the effects of our choices on the environment. This means thinking carefully about what we buy, how much we consume, and how our consumption habits affect the planet. By practicing mindful consumption, we can reduce our environmental impact and live more sustainably, building compassionate communities. Collective action for environmental change. Loy emphasizes the importance of collective action in addressing the ecological crisis. While individual changes are important, real transformation requires coming together in communities that share a commitment to environmental sustainability. By building compassionate communities, we can support each other in making more sustainable choices and working toward systemic change. Imagine living in a world where communities prioritize the well-being of the earth and all its inhabitants. Doesn't that sound like a beautiful vision? Loy believes that by fostering compassion and mindfulness on a collective level, we can create the conditions for lasting environmental change. Conclusion: a holistic vision for a sustainable future. David Loy's work offers a profound and holistic response to the ecological crisis, rooted in Buddhist philosophy. He shows us that the environmental challenges we face aren't just physical or economic, they're spiritual. arising from a fundamental misunderstanding of the self and its relationship to the world. By applying Buddhist principles such as impermanence, interdependence, non-self, and compassion, Loy argues that we can transform both our inner lives and our relationship with the environment. His vision calls for a radical shift away from consumerism and exploitation toward a more mindful, compassionate, and sustainable way of life. This transformation isn't just about changing our behavior, it's about changing our consciousness. It's about recognizing that we are not separate from the earth but part of a vast web of interconnection. And when we truly understand this, we can begin to live in harmony with the natural world, caring for it as we would care for ourselves. Doesn't that give you hope for the future? What a beautiful world it could be if we all followed Loy's lead.